Episode in my authenticity series. Today we're going to be starting off pretty simply with a simple question, with answering the simple question of what is authenticity. Authenticity is a kind of a big, huge, monstrous topic. Nowadays, I won't get too into it, but with the kind of the dissolution of social grouping, with the herd, with the family unit, and with the rise of individuation since probably the 18th century. Basically, authenticity is huge, and the concept of it has probably developed, especially with the uprising of the concept of self and having our own self and ego. So I'm going to be answering what is authenticity by breaking it down into what it is and what it isn't, with the latter hopefully clarifying the former. So essentially the crux of it is that authenticity is forming your own beliefs and then acting upon them in the real world. It is, as Kierkegaard states, Kierkegaard, whatever you want to say, if I did write it down, is facing reality and then acting upon it. I can't even find the note, but that's pretty much what it is. I don't think I even wrote it down, which is handy. So it's facing objective reality, processing it, interpreting it, and then acting upon it without essentially contorted views, which we'll get onto in another video probably. Basically, your misbeliefs, your cultural influences which are misconstrued by you. So yeah, it's also going beyond, I guess you can say, as Nietzsche put it, going beyond good and evil, maybe, if that's what he meant by it. Well, that's my interpretation of it for this context. So it's going beyond the societal notions of good and evil, what is morally good and bad, what is just and unjust, and deciding for yourself, well, society sees this as good, society sees this as bad, and you can replace society for my family, my friends, my dog, my boss, my teacher, and you bring things that are generally accepted as good and bad and question them for yourself. And once you have come to a conclusion, then you act upon it and you stay true to that belief, no matter the conflict. We can get into, you can have caveats like, if I'm going to die, well, I guess at that point you value your life more than, standing to talk in the classroom, as an extreme stupid example, but you know what I mean. You have your value system in place. It's based on your value system, therefore. So you have to have a value and belief system in place to act authentically, and that's one of these hoodoo voodoo things, like my belief system. How do I, is number one integrity, number two, sincerity, number three, trust, number four, compassion. And every decision I make, you go through these. It's really convoluted, saying my belief system. But you have a general notion of your beliefs, based on, I guess, your past actions. And that is why, if you want to start living authentically, you need to cultivate some self-awareness and be honest with yourself. And you could do that through like meditation, journaling, reflection, for example. So that's hopefully you've got a gist of what authenticity is. It's being true to oneself, insofar as you understand your beliefs and what you think about certain things before you act, and then you act after processing the choices you can make. You act. So what authenticity is not is basing your actions on in the moment whims which have been procured by externalities, by people in the moment, essentially by the situation. So people may posit that they have been authentic by telling a lie because in the moment it was more advantageous to them to tell the lie than it was the truth. They can just happily deceive themselves by saying, well, no, I lied because I garner more value by lying than I do by being truthful. Thus I lied and thus I'm being authentic. No, that's not authenticity. Because if you're being authentic, then let's hypothesize that we have truth as a value. Sincerity higher than insincerity, even if that does come into the value systems at some point. So you're acting inauthentically if you are guided by the situation. If the situation determines yourself, your mode of being, then that is inauthentic living. And that's a big one. That is quite a big one. Because I won't get into it, but I think it was Heidegger in his Dasein, which is saying being in the world, and this is all situational. You're in the world, yourself is in the world, and thus you're like dependent on your situation, your environment. This authenticity says that no, really, yourself may be cultivated by past experience in the world, but your present action is not dictated by your present beliefs, and what determines your action is not determined by the pressures of external forces, if that makes sense. So what I'm saying there is, if my boss asks me to do something, obviously there is a situation at hand, which is I need to make a decision based on my boss's question, but I'm not pressured by him being a boss, for example, and me having to believe that, oh, he'll want me to do X because he's a boss, thus I should do X. It's saying, okay, I'm looking at this objectively, I'm looking at reality, and saying, okay, well, here is my boss, this is what I think, this is what I value, thus I will do X over Y. If that pisses off my boss, so be it. That's me living authentically. Living authentically wouldn't constitute as, oh, here's my boss, must appease him, because then no matter who your boss is, you're going to be appeasing them, and they could be living completely counter to your value system or whatever. You're living vicariously through them at that point to some extent. Also, what authenticity isn't is unquestioned conformity. You can conform to some extent in some ways and be authentic. So you can eat. You can eat a pretty bog standard diet of 3 meals a day and live on whatever. You're being a conformist. you're a terrible person now. You're conforming to society by eating. No, you just question generally. Eating, I don't think you really need to question, but you generally question socially imposed norms. Some things might run true with your personality and yourself. Many might not. But you question, that's the important thing. You question, you process, and then you make a decision and act upon it. If boots are in fashion, do I like boots? Well, X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. Yes, I like boots. Oh, you're a conformist. No, I genuinely like boots, and thus when everyone else jumps onto wearing sandals in winter, you're going to stay wearing boots, It's also not listening to contorted beliefs you have about yourself and the world. This is quite a difficult one, and one that probably takes a lot of time to dissolve, to integrate, is probably the better word, into your being, because it's very complex. We're complex people. This takes a lot of reflection, maybe going through all your life events that may have changed you, or the things that you remember as being quite poignant in your life, and breaking them down and looking at them more objectively, and then re-evaluating and perhaps developing your belief system based on this new, more objective look at past events that would have altered your life heretofore, and that's a pretty big one. So yeah, this can take the form of like reflection, meditation, journaling, reflective journaling, experiencing things which you may have experienced in the past, which would have hurt you in the past, and then coming to them now with a more rational lens, and therefore learning that this isn't as scary as I thought, and this isn't inherently bad, etc. That's probably more of a lifelong process, hence why authenticity can be a journey, an active one at that. And hopefully that answers the question of what authenticity is. It's basically acting in accordance with oneself and one's beliefs, stripping your belief system and perspective of contortions and discrepancies, reconciling those discrepancies between you and the world, you and reality. It is seeing reality in as much of an objective lens as you can garner, as you can manage, as you can muster, and then acting upon it. And it's a process, It's learning what you love, or relearning what you love, and carrying out those passions, and attempting to master them, I guess. And these passions are different than the biological passions of sex, food, thirst, shelter, connection. And then, attempting to master them. There will be signals of inauthenticity, as Sartre puts it, bad faith, which can be like an existential anxiety, but we'll get onto that later on. Thank you for listening. Hopefully my blabber has been of some use, has been quite informative, and I don't know what I'll talk about next video. It may be simply jumping into how to cultivate authenticity. I think that would be quite a meaty topic, and then later on we can go into such things as if there are any objectively meaningful pursuits, so we can get to meaning as well, which is kind of coherent, related to authenticity, how to become aware of your purpose, and how to refrain from erring from your life path. So So yeah, see you next time.